But I want to wrap up the story of Linda. We talked to her just a few minutes ago, and she was telling us about how she and her husband had been visiting an oncologist, and he had made a proposal to them at dinner that Linda could come into the doctor's office looking as though she were ill, and he was going to arrange to get a homeless person to be her, somebody who was already riddled with cancer. And so let's just back up 2 seconds, Linda, for people who are just tuning in. Your doctor turns to you at dinner and says, "I want to assure you I don't kill anybody." And then what? Yeah. Then what happened?
Well, he said he didn't have to because the people he had in the apartments were already dying, and they were all street people with no family or no associated contacts. So anyway, so he said, the lady that I have in mind for you, he said, she looks similar to you, but not really. But he said, when she dies, he said, you have to be ready to leave immediately your house. And he said, I'm going to have someone pick you up and take you to the airport. And you need to disappear. He said, you can never make contact with anyone you've known in the past, like no friends or anything. And he said, the body is going to, he said, I'm going to wrap the body. It has to be wrapped according to state specs with the coroner's office. He said, I know the coroner, but he has no idea what's going on. But I trust him as far as he knows that I know how to wrap the bodies and go along with state procedure. So he said, so I will wrap her body. When the coroner's office gets there, you will be put on an expected death list immediately. He said every state has an expected death list, and so do oncologists. And then the death is expected, and it's not investigated, because you were already on the cancer list and whatever. So anyway, so he said, he said, you have to be ready to go to the airport immediately. And he said, you won't be seeing your husband for a few weeks. He said, I'm going to take care of having him a 24-hour nurse. And he said, you will leave immediately. And he said, this body will be placed in your bed. I will wrap it. The coroner's office will come get it. And according to your will that you're going to make out now, you want to be cremated immediately. And he said, since you two have your properties going to the Humane Society and we have the $1 million house, he said, I would like for you to quick claim your properties over to me because, he said, I'm doing this for you. And he said, you're going to be getting $7 million cash. He said, your policies you've had for a long time, you got them when your husband was first getting sick. So he said, they're going to pay within 30 days. So he said, you need to go to the airport. And he said, now, you will have a phone number to contact your husband to join you as soon as these policies are paid off. And he said, believe me, they will positively be paid within 30 days.
Now, what did you say? Did you say yes or no to this?
Well, I was afraid to say anything because when I hugged him, I felt a gun. and so I said, okay. I said, we will, we'll get back to you tomorrow. And
then you got the hell out of there, and you never went back and saw that guy again.
Well, that's right. But he did say one thing that was very interesting. He said, I'm planning on doing this myself. He said that he was a doctor. His wife was a nurse. And he said, we have a place tucked away in the Bahamas. And he said, we're planning on doing this. And he said, we can buy all these policies without question because of our income and whatever, just like you. So anyway, that was kind of the last thing he said. Well, the next morning, my husband and I are sitting looking across from each other, and we're straight people, never been in any trouble, never heard of anything like this. And I said, look, we need to do something. If we say we're not interested, we could get killed or who knows what. We thought this guy was a legitimate, nice doctor, right?
Right.
So I said, what do you think we should do? And my husband said, I think we should lock the house up and we should leave and never have any contact with him again.
Yeah.
So that's what we did. We
left immediately.
Yeah, we left immediately, went to Florida, and then he died about 5 months later, I think.
Your husband did?
Yes, within 5 to 6 months. But we, and we couldn't find anything wrong. We couldn't find out. There's no way that we could figure out, not having any kind of police background, we couldn't figure out any way that he could get caught. The body wrapped.
You're probably right. In a lot of ways, it's the perfect crime, and it's both a robbery and in some ways you could even say a murder, But We'll let it go at that. Thank you so much for calling back and for sharing that story with us.
Yeah, I prevented a 9/11 situation from happening and lost my job in Connecticut. Now it's in the U.S. Supreme Court to be reviewed. The judge in Connecticut dismissed it as a frivolous lawsuit. What I found was two separate hangars. The first one was open for over 20 hours with nobody around. $300 million worth of airplanes in the hangar. I'm an aviation safety counselor. I had to call the FAA, TSA, and Homeland Security. Second week.
What's your case? You got to take a breath in here somewhere. What's your case called?
Well, it's called in the interest of public safety, tort interference, slander, and free speech.
No. I mean, you had a case. It must have been like, Bob versus Connecticut or something like that.
I don't know if you could mention the name of the companies, though.
Okay, well, then let's not get into it. So you're saying, though, that you took this case and it went to the Connecticut Supreme Court?
Well, I took it to a federal judge in Connecticut, and he dismissed it as a frivolous lawsuit.
I
so
see.
I took it. Then I went to the appeals court, and of course they go along with the judges in Connecticut, and now it's in the U.S. Supreme Court.
So it's not in the Supreme Court. They're going to review whether or not they'll look at it.
Well, that's about where it is. Okay. I was told if I didn't leave the hangar, I'd be arrested for trespassing. I said, wait a minute, I'm aviation manager for this company here. And he says, not in this hangar, you're not. The people that run the hangar. And they were really ticked off that I contacted one of the other clients in the hangar. Well, the client that was in the hangar, who's a multi-billionaire, I was in the service with him back in 1965. You telling me I can't call this guy?
Well, I'm not saying anything. So
yeah.
okay,
I'm
okay,
you,
yeah.
So
that's interesting. So then, then I guess hopefully, if you haven't feel like you've gotten your day in court, that maybe then someday you will. And in the court of public opinion, I'm sorry you lost your job. Let's just say that.
In the mid-'90s. I don't know how much you know about the Illuminati, but you probably know a little bit about it. And I had read up some different stuff by John Todd and different things. Anyway, I went to this seminar, and this man that was raised in the Illuminati. And he said he was telling the kind of plan that they were using, but he wasn't given a time frame. He said the first thing they was doing was to get everybody wrapped up in materialism and split the family unit up, okay? And then he said that when they'd done that, he said that our government would create terrorist attacks and blame them on foreign countries, and we, the American people, would willingly give up our constitutional rights in turn for protection from our government, which was really the one that was creating the problem. And he said this has been the agenda of the Illuminati for many years, and this was way prior to 9/11. I heard this in the mid-'90s.
I've heard, if I'm totally honest with you, I've heard that same thing, but not associated with John Todd. He was the guy who was against Dungeons and Dragons, right? He was the guy. He was the main spokesperson against the rope.
No. He was in the Illuminati, and he was in the Council of 13, and he came out of that and became a Christian. He went around to churches.
Yeah, that's the same guy. He was against Dungeons and Dragons. That's how I know the guy, because he came out and he said Dungeons and Dragons were leading us down into the occult, pagan, and I thought he was born in a witchcraft family, not a Illuminati family.
John Todd actually. John Todd, when I used to have some of the tapes, but John Todd, you remember the show Dark Shadows?
Yeah. John
Todd, okay, and there's a Lance Collins. He said actually that show was actually the real story of the Collins family that goes way back in involvement with witchcraft. But this fellow, I don't remember this fellow's name, but anyway, but he was saying that whenever that our government would create these terrorist attacks and blame them on foreign countries, that it says we Americans would willingly give up our constitutional rights. Yeah. And he said And the thing of it is, he said, that they work it like that. And see, and most Americans, I'm a Vietnam veteran, and so there's a lot of things that I don't have too much confidence in this country that I learned while I was in Vietnam, and I won't go into that. But anyway.
Well, back to John Todd real quick. Help me out with. I haven't heard his name mentioned in a long time.
Yeah.
Wasn't he convicted of? Wasn't he convicted of rape or child molestation?
No. Here's what happened.
He wasn't.
Okay. No. Here's what happened. Do you know who Jack Chick is?
No.
Okay. Jack Chick makes these what they call Chick publications, which are religious things, and they deal with all different realms of different things. And he did some of the things that he got information from John Todd. Okay, what happened? I called the Jack Chick or wrote him, I can't remember, a while back. It's been several years, and I asked him about John Todd. And he said John was letting out too much information, and the Illuminati trumped up some phony charges and put him in prison. And he said,
so you're saying, but he was convicted of rape, but you're saying that was an Illuminati plot.
But it was all done through the Illuminati, because since he had left the Illuminati and become a Christian, he was letting too many things be known, and so they trumped up some phony charges, and then he started giving him disinformation so people would lose contact with him. He had a place set up out in the West where people that wanted to come out of witchcraft could come to. And he had guards and all that, and some of these church people said, you shouldn't have guns and stuff like that. And he was gone traveling, and while he was gone, people from out of the witchcraft thing came in there and murdered 6 girls that had come out of the occult. And John said, you don't realize the fact that they've got bounties on their head when they come out of that. But he used to advertise, and Chick did in the back of some of these Chick publications about that. But this other guy, I can't remember his name.
I'm running out of time, but I appreciate that.
Okay, but basically, it's what our government is doing these terrorist attacks and blaming it on somebody else. And this is what the man said, and he was raised in the Illuminati all his life.
Again, thank you, Russ. I thought he was raised in witchcraft. I have to go back and see if I could find something. I remember John Todd. I remember I wasn't into Dungeons and Dragons all that much, but I had really good friends who were, and so his name would come up a lot because they would read these publications about how Dungeons and Dragons are supposed to be the worst thing ever, and then he ends up getting arrested for and convicted of rape or child molestation or both. I can't remember, and then he died in prison. So they were saying, look, here's this guy who's accusing us, and look what happens to him. But as Russ said, that was an Illuminati plot. Do the spirit guides allow you to be more specific on when and where or what type?
Well, here's the thing that I think you don't realize is that in spirit, the past, present, and future are one. Here, we're in this program of time, and that was created to create order and a system, for people to go about their business and such, which we're coming away from. I mean, I don't know if you've noticed, but many people that I talk to, it's like a quickening, it's like, okay, where did that day go? It just seemed like it was just a few hours, or vice versa. It really depends on the person's state of the mind. You did ask me, I believe, although these are talking about who's going to win for the election.
Well, tell me about Dick Cheney having a heart attack. Did I hear you right?
He is going to die of a heart attack or a stroke, and he will not be able to finish his term.
And that's 2008.
Maybe even, yeah. Well, actually, I'll cover my butt here and say yes, absolutely.
It'll have to be because his term's up.
I was going to say we're now, and
right. So
we're heading for January, so absolutely.
Okay, so but no, not necessarily knowing when, but you think Dick Cheney won't make it? Now,
no, he won't make it. No.
Who will be the nominees in 2008? Any idea on what the spirit guides?
Yes, I have them right here. Well, first of all, I've said this a long, long time that. It would be a Democrat that would come in, and it actually, and this is not, and let me make this clear, a lot of people say, well, is this your personal opinion. No. My opinion, as I said, I'm not even interested in, is the information that I received. Not only that Dick Cheney wouldn't make it through his what's left of his term, but that also another assassination attempt, they will fail, and also that we will have a Democrat as our next president, and it will be, I'm predicting Hillary Clinton.
Okay. Well, you see, you're predicting, so the spirit, and this is where I'm always curious, so this is what you're told is going to happen?
This is what I'm told in prayer and meditation from whatever you would like to call God, from the Great Spirit to the collective consciousness, God, God's guardian, the angel kingdom, spirit guides. That's who I deal with. If that's what you're wondering when I say they. I mean spirit.
Okay. And so that we can count out. Who will be the Republican nominee?
Okay, hold on. The Republican nominee. I'm looking here at my papers.
There's a lot of upheaval on the Republican side.
Oh, yeah,
these
there
days,
is.
so.
It's going to be interesting. Here we go. We are going to have John McCain, and we are going to have Rudy Giuliani. There we go.
As the ticket will be John McCain and Rudy Giuliani?
Yep, that's what they told me.
And John McCain will be the nominee, the Republican presidential nominee. Rudy Giuliani will be vice president.
Correct.
Will be the nominee for that. Wow.
And then for
that is a heck of a prediction.
It will be Hillary Clinton and then John Edwards as vice president.
As vice president.
Mm-hmm.
Well, those are the kind of specific things we can check back on against.
That's right. You're going to hold me to it and say, well, she was right or she was wrong.
When you're wrong, what happens? I mean, what's the breakdown when you're
wrong? And I'll be the first one to say.
Yeah, no. I mean, what happened if a spirit guide or a divine word?
No, they're never wrong. It would be.
Okay.
They're never wrong. If it's, let's say, if I give information and I'm wrong, it would be my fault, not Spirit's fault, because that means my ego, or I'm coloring the information and I'm getting in the way of it and not giving it to you directly as they give it to me. See, it's not for me to question, because sometimes I hear and I even think, well, that seems really crazy.
Right.
But I have to be honest with you, I've been naturally gifted since childhood, and it's always spot on when I go with it. It's when I don't trust it and listen to it. For example, with my near-death experience, I was specifically told, do not get in the car. And what did I do? I got in the got.
Well, again, we've been talking with Michelle White Dove. She just won Lifetime Television's America's #1 psychic. I got about 30 seconds. I was told by a previous guest, an astrologer, an author of a book on luck, that 2008 will be my luckiest year ever in my life.
Yeah, you're going to take off, my friend.
Why am I going to have such a good year when the country's in such sad shape?
Well, because it's just because the world is in, that doesn't mean that you have to be buy into that. There are people that can go through it.
All right. Well, then I was born in the year of the rat, so maybe that's why 2008
I don't know.
will be my year.
On that.
Okay. Well, I appreciate.
By the way, I have pulled up for you those assassinations, Colombia. Let's see here, and that
running
was
out of time.
Right. 2004.
Right. Michelle White Dove, thank you so much. You can link up to her website through coasttocoastam.com. Look forward to finishing this conversation again sometime in 2008. We'll go back and take a look at what you predicted, and congratulations on your victory. Open lines coming up next.
These earthquakes that we're having here, Ian, I'd like your thoughts on this. Now, I have a theory here. We've had earthquakes, recordable earthquakes, since the dawn of time here, since we started recording them anyway. But, here recently, it just seems like they've ramped up to a point to where we're having almost a major earthquake every week, every other week here. And my theory on that is that it's a warning. It's a warning. Matthew 24, verse 7 talks about all these earthquakes in diverse places or various places, that these are the beginnings of sorrows. And if you add that together with the global picture of the, just everything that's going on with the storms, the economic crisis, and all.
Well, why would it be any different? Let me just ask you this: why would it be any different than, say, when there was a series of earthquakes during World War II? And then you got Hitler, You got the whole world was at war, and there were earthquakes. Why did we not think that that was the end of the world?
Well, I don't. I think because we didn't have so many of them as we are now. The sheer numbers of them that we're having here in the last year.
You'd have to show me statistically that we have more. I mean, I understand anecdotally you're paying attention to it, so you notice it more. But I would think there's a set number of earthquakes that probably happen every year and has for a very long time. That one begets another one begets another one. But I go back to, I don't think our times are all that evil. I think we have, relatively speaking, we have world peace. We have conflicts here and there, and no doubt we're still involved in Iraq and Afghanistan. But where is it that you feel like we are in such peril?
Well, I think because it just strikes me odd that we've had so many of them here in a short period of time. Like I said, if you do a timeline, and I'm going to do a project here where I can do a timeline and kind of pinpoint where all these, the earthquakes that we've been having. And I think you probably would agree that just about every nation on Earth right now is in some sort of conflict. As opposed to
here's what I would agree on. I think they've always been in some kind of conflict. Every nation on the planet has always been in some kind of conflict. There's never a time when we're not in conflict. And we have been in worse conflict in the past. And the reason I mean, honestly, I'm trying to explore it with you, but that's where I keep coming back to it, because I'm a guy as well as being a person of faith, I'm a student of science. So I'll go look up the certain, how many earthquakes we've had. And I swear we'll come back to, probably like everybody was predicting we're going to have all these hurricanes. They never showed up. I mean, and I think that we can attach significance to them, and maybe they'll be right. Heck, we've been wrong for 2,000 years about the end of the world.
Right.
And every prediction every Christian has ever made based on a prophetic, Bible prophecy has been wrong for 2,000 years. We're bound to be right one day. I mean, one day somebody's going to say it and it's going to be true. But why are these circumstances so special?
Well, I think, too, because you got to also put in play there, too, they're talking about this, there's the talk of the one world government, the biometric ID card, just everything is just so different than it was back then. And
okay, but Revelation has a very specific idea of what the events are supposed to be that take place before the end of the world. So if we're going to go by the New Testament, those are very specific criteria. They are not vague. They are not general. So if you want to go by that, let's go by that. But that doesn't mean, things like, new developments in biometrics. But keep working on that theory and grab an open line call sometime in the future and tell me how there are so many more earthquakes than there have ever been.
I was dating a woman who was an editor at Little Brown and Company, and she took me to her parents in Connecticut to introduce me. And her mother was an editor at Lippincott, and her father had worked for a lettered information agency of the federal government. He had said to her that he wanted to tell me something, and she said, "No, Daddy, no," and she kind of stormed out and left the house. And he was in a wheelchair, so he wheeled over to me and said, "There are things you should know if you're considering becoming part of this family." And so I sat and listened. And he said that when he was in college during the Second World War, he was recruited by the federal government, and he felt patriotic and like he was going to do some great things. He ended up basically writing propaganda, and they all expected, it was a small department at that time in his department, that at the end of the war that they would be let go or farmed off to other agencies. But to their surprise, after the war ended, their business just blossomed. That they were getting requests from every department, agency, and branch of government to create cover stories for everything. He said that the government doesn't do a single thing without a lie to cover what it's doing. And he went along with this because it was his job, but he started to get a little bit uneasy about this when he went to a party in D.C. where there were all the very well-informed people, and people were his customers who had gone to him to get lies, and this guy got into an argument with him. He had used his services, but he had taken one of his lies and so incorporated it into his system of beliefs that he argued with him, and he should have known better. And then he realized how much he himself had been responsible for polluting the ground of being of our country. And he started to act like an infection in his system, and he was fully ambulatory. But when I met him, he was in a wheelchair, all kind of crumpled up, because it ate at him with the damage that he had done. And I have no reason to believe that since then they've reformed the government in this respect. I think that probably.
Now, what happened to the relationship? You decided not to marry into that family?
No, that never happened.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting that he put. Now, what was it about him telling you that, though, that spooked her so much? Did she tell you later?
Well, I think that no, she didn't tell me. I can only guess that perhaps he had told other prospective mates, and that
just kept trying to scare him off. Yeah, maybe it was all a big story just to keep guys away from his daughter. But I believe him, and I believe your version of that, and that's very interesting too. That again, that relationship between what we do and what we are, and the fact that his body eventually, over time, sort of absorbed the sins, if you will, of his words. These onboard suicides. That there's a percentage of people, and it's sort of the dirty little secret of the cruise industry, that are just kind of bound and determined to jump off a ship, and that happens a lot more than we ever hear about. Are you up to speed on that? I mean, is that something you hear about too?
I've never had, thank goodness, a person go overboard on a ship I've been on. Thank goodness. But yes, there is. I've been reading about that, and I don't know what that is. It's maybe
the call of
new.
The open sea or something.
Yeah, maybe it's a new thing that people want to just have their last hurrah go over the side of the ship. I'm not really sure why they do that. I mean, maybe they're just they would do it elsewhere too, but it just happens to be where they decide to check out.
Right, but and then they said that too. There's a lot more, and I'm just going by. This is like an Inside Edition story or something, so I don't have anything immediately at my fingertips to back this up. But that there are a lot more. We may never know how many cases of people who go missing off of boats are actually pushed. That there might be a lot more than that, and they simply just don't investigate. That there just aren't, they're not, it's not in the cruise ship industry's interest to investigate or to say, hey, there was been a murder on the ship, because that would be poison, as it were. So they just kind of say, oh, well, somebody jumped, and that's the end of it. They never go back, right? I mean, you never turn a ship around and try to, because by the time you did, those things just don't turn around on a dime.
Well, on a regular ship, a merchant ship, we'd always go back.
Would you?
Yes. Well, if we found, and that's the reason, either the captain or the first officer or the chief engineer, every day we'll do a check to make sure everybody's on board, anybody's missing, when was the last time they were seen, and sure, we'll go back. And because we have a good record of where we've been, and now with electronic charting we can get very close, we'll actually go back. It's an obligation that all of us who go to sea take very seriously. If somebody goes overboard, we have to do our best to find them.
Have you ever found?
And I think cruise ships will do too. They're obligated by the same law of the sea when somebody goes overboard. But of course, they don't want to advertise it too much, so they might, they may not tell the passengers, because a lot of times the cruise ships have so short a distance between ports. And you'll see this if you work out in the Gulf of Mexico. You'll see cruise ships doing donuts out there because they have to time their arrival for the next port. And if they went on a straight shot, just going, all out, they'd make it there in, 8 hours.
I heard that one of the captains said or something that by the time the reports make it up to the bridge that somebody has gone overboard, that it makes more sense for them to call the Coast Guard and search for them, and then instead of turning the whole ship around and going back. And I don't know why he said that, but
there have been some cases of foreign captains not doing their responsibility when it came to somebody falling overboard.
Have you ever gotten somebody? Has anybody ever fallen overboard on one of your ships?
No, nobody's ever fallen overboard on one of our ships. One of the ships I've been on. I've been on almost 40 vessels in my career. But we have. I was on a ship once that rescued some fishermen off of the coast of California. We were on a tanker that was coming down from Cherry Point and Ferndale up in Washington down to Los Angeles. And off of Northern California, above Eureka, there was a report, and fishermen came on board, and we got them. There were 3 of them. And we got them on board, and they were really happy we picked them out of there. But the norovirus thing...
Had their ship just had their boat run out of power, or had it sunk, or...
They were in a small boat, and they, I think, had gone out too far, ran out of fuel, couldn't figure out where they were at. This was before GPS,
right?
And so they were out there floundering. And we had a report.
Have you ever gotten a castaway?
One ship I was on, I had just gotten off of, but right after I left, I flew out. There were 3 stowaways that they found in the emergency diesel generator room. And stowaways are a real problem.
Are they?
When you find stowaways on the ship, the shipping company has an obligation to repatriate them back to where they came from. So you have to turn the ship around and go back to the port and bring them back. And if you don't find them for 3 or 4 days, well, that's the way it goes. You still got to go back.
Do you really?
Oh,
you can't
yeah. The company, either that or you bring them to where you go next. You fill out lots of paperwork. You're probably going to have to be detained while immigration comes aboard, U.S. immigration, and sorts it out. And then the company has to put them up and fly them back, and you'll definitely hear about that one.
Well, why can't you just bring them back at your earliest convenience and keep them in the brig in the meantime?
Well, we don't have brigs on merchant ships.
You don't?
No, we don't.
What do you do with the drunken sailor?
Well, we fire him usually.
Does that work?
We do. But we usually lock them in their room.
Okay.
And
lock them in their room.
Yeah,
give them a big timeout.
Yeah, and we have a lock on the outside and that keeps them in there. We had a problem on one ship I was on where there was a guy that was playing bagpipes after watch at night, and he would be back on the stern. He's playing bagpipes. And the cook's room, now the cook has to get up really early.
Right.
Start the ovens and the bacon and everything getting going. I don't know if it's Canadian bacon or not, but bacon.
Right.
But anyway, so he would be getting up like at 5 in the morning. So this guy go back, and he's playing the bagpipes, and finally, the cook's looking more and more tired, and he says, if you don't stop that bagpipes playing, that's going to be the end of it. So one day the guy goes out there, and it was after midnight. He's on the stern, and here comes the cook with a butcher knife. He goes out, and he doesn't attack the guy, but he attacks the bagpipes.
He smashes them
bagpipes? To bits. He hacks them to bits, throws them overboard. And so anyway, I was a junior officer at that point. This was a number of years ago, and so everybody got overtime keeping the cook in his room. We fed him, of course, and he was no problem whatsoever. And the last words we heard as he was taken away in handcuffs in the next port was, "Those last 2 days are the best sleep I got the whole time I've been on board."
Well, if I were a bagpiper, that sounds like a great place to play the bagpipes, out on the open sea at night to the sky. I mean, that sounds fabulous, but, you forget about the people trying to sleep. So.
Yeah, you got to kind of be cool about that. But, the norovirus thing we were talking about, that's going to be a real problem, and I think it's going to be an emerging problem. There's been a number of ships that have been detained. Actually, there was a ship a few weeks ago that wasn't allowed to leave Britain because they were so, it wasn't a quarantine officially, but essentially it was quarantined because they had so many people with norovirus on there. They weren't allowed to go to the next port. I think it was like 1 out of every 4 people on board were sick.
Well, I mean, I'm sure it will be. Would you take a cruise yourself?
Well, for a number of reasons, not the least of which it would be a busman's holiday. Probably not.
I mean, Daniel Hofstetter has a book called Burying the Boys, and on the cover of that book is Lee Harvey Oswald and Barry Seal. Barry Seal was a drug runner and a gun runner. He wound up shot to death on the courthouse steps, and in his black address book, the coroner found George Herbert Walker Bush's personal phone number. There's stories of Edward Kennedy was supposed to be on board with Wellstone, the Wellstone family, 10 days before that plane crashed and burned, and that the Bushes were both seen at JFK Jr.'s airport where his plane was stored days before he wound up dead.
Stop there. The Bushes themselves were seen at the airport for JFK?
Yes, they were, and so were Mossad agents. And if you look into the New York senator seat that was open, and also the future presidency seat that was open that Bush was going to run for, and that Hillary Clinton wound up running for, you just see these characters all over the place. In fact, the Persian Gulf War was a pretext. The pretext that jump-started that was the theft of up to $14 billion worth of oil from Kuwait, and that jump-started the Persian Gulf War. And when that didn't go down, they decided to run this fake story that 14 babies were thrown out of incubators, and that was jump-started by an advertising firm. The CIA and the advertising firms and the Bushes are all, this whole thing, Russ, you're completely right. Even Stan...
Okay. Let's give Russ a chance to respond to that. There was a lot there, and so I appreciate that. But I thought there's some good stuff in there, and there's some stuff in there that I've never heard before. It doesn't seem like the Bushes to get their hands dirty personally.
That's right. I mean, they're very, very careful, and we see this with both the father and the son. And I tell these stories in Family of Secrets. You know, the father, of course, famously said that he was out of the loop when it came to Iran-Contra, which was just impossible because the whole government at that level was deeply involved in this illegal covert operation. And then the son also claiming he didn't know about things. And in fact, you were talking about, we haven't gotten to the second half of the book, but there are all these stories, and they're showing George W. Bush to be a much more canny individual than we understood him to be, really quite clever about many, many tactical things, knowing, for example, how to, when he wanted a story that he would get out in the press, he would sort of bury it in plain sight. He would kind of, make sure that somebody overheard him telling a story or something, and then the press would think that they had discovered something on their own. So very, very careful to stage things and to keep their fingerprints off of them.
Okay, Mike Markham was made a national name by Art Bell on this program back in the 90s. He was a 21-year-old electrical school dropout. He went to Rio Grande College in Rio Grande, Ohio, and left school and moved to a little town called Stanberry, Missouri, which is about 27 miles from where I'm sitting right now. It's right now approximately 1,200 people, and he was sitting around the house he was renting one night, and he was kind of bored, and he built a Jacob's ladder. And for those out there who aren't familiar with what a Jacob's ladder is, it's two vertical pieces of metal that you send an electric current through, and the current jumps between the two pieces of metal until it dissipates at the top. I think Dr. Frankenstein brought the monster to life.
Yeah.
For these. Anyway,
we see those in a certain type of movies, and people would recognize both by look and by sound.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, he built one of these things, and he noticed a weird heat signature hovering over this Jacob's ladder, and he did what any guy would do. He threw something at it. He picked up a finishing screw off of his table and threw it at the hole, and when it hit the hole, it disappeared. And it was gone for maybe 5 to 8 seconds, and then it hit the table again. And he jumped immediately to the conclusion that he built a time machine. And he wanted to build a bigger one because, hey, if I built a time machine, I want to build one big enough for me to jump through. And the cool part of the story is that he didn't want to go through to increase the body of knowledge or to benefit mankind. He wanted to go 3 days in the future to get the lottery numbers.
It was either going to be that or to impress a girl. That'd be the other reason you do it. Go, hey, look what I can do. That kind of thing.
Yeah, well, I think the money might impress the girls too.
They might tie it in together. Okay, fair enough.
Well, in order to build a man-sized one, he had to have more power than what was coming through the outlet. And him and a few friends
one day went to a substation of St. Joe Power and Light and stole 6 power line transformers, which these things are huge. They had to make a couple trips to do it, and it was in the middle of the day, 11 o'clock in the mornings when they lifted the first one, so I have no idea why they weren't caught. But they took them all back to his house, and he built a man-sized Jacob's ladder on his back porch. And he got caught because when he fired the thing up, all the lights in town went off. And I interviewed the city manager who worked for the city electric department at the time, and I interviewed his arresting officer. And you'd asked the question about what interviews were the most credible. As soon as I mentioned Mike's name, these guys, I had to wait a few minutes for him to stop laughing.
Right.
Right.
But you say that it's the most credible. It was the most credible that he had something that he threw, into, and then it fell seconds later, and so he looks at that in terms of a time machine. But making a Jacob's ladder that actually makes people disappear, that's not something he's done yet.
Well, and that's a big question. Nobody knows. After he spent 3 months in jail, his story hit the AP wire, and that's when Art Bell picked it up and interviewed him. Markham, after he got out of jail, moved to St. Joseph, and because of Art's exposure, he had people donating money and equipment to him to build this thing legally. And in the apartment building he was in, when he was working on it, his landlord kicked him out because there was a rumor that he'd thrown a cat through the thing.
Okay.
And
right.
and the quote in the St. Joseph News Press from Markham was, "That cat thing, it ain't true."
Yeah, the first a cat thrown into an interdimension, and that the cat never came back is the assumption.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
And then Markham disappeared and never came back.
But he didn't disappear through that.
Well, who knows? All of his friends in St. Joseph in 1999, he just vanished. Nobody knew what happened to him. And I did quite a bit of digging to try and find somebody who'd seen him afterward, and I did. I found somebody who lives in Cincinnati who lived in the same apartment complex as Markham did for a couple of years. Markham since moved, and he has no idea where the guy is. But he claims that while they were sitting around drinking sodas and playing video games, Markham would tell him about the time machine. And he told him that he'd built the thing again, and he described a bunch of gadgets that he played with when he went into the future. And what he described was the iPhone and various video games. And the guy said he described it like he'd used the iPhone and like he'd sat down and played these video games. But this was years before any of this was released. So he's convinced that Markham did build his time machine and did go to the future, and now he's gone again.
Okay, well, why didn't he get the lottery numbers? That was the plan, wasn't it?
Yes, yeah, it was. Well, maybe after playing with the iPhone, he went to the past, and it's maybe his invention now.
Maybe.